Hello, everyone, and welcome to our weekly discussion series that's hosted by the Chaldean Cultural Center in collaboration with U of M Detroit Center, Unique Voices and Films, and CMN TV. I'm your host, Am Nemu, and my guest today is Dr. Stan Williams. Welcome, Dr. Stan.
Hi, William. Good to see you.
So, Dr. Stan is an award-winning film, video, show and music producer, media distributor, author, and Hollywood script consultant. Since 1972, he has overseen hundreds of broadcast, industrial, and dramatic productions, both secular and Catholic, that have been distributed worldwide. He holds a PhD in narrative theory, a master's in mass communications, and a bachelor's in physics. So you're an author of numerous books, which we will discuss. But I want to share that you and I met almost 20 years ago.
Wow, that long ago.
I know. In 2004, at the Motion Picture Institute of Michigan, I was a student in film school, and you were one of my teachers. And you took interest in my work. You're a very good teacher, and we stayed connected because I was always trying to work on these projects, and I used to reach out to you, and you were very helpful. So thank you for that. But you've also had a lot of courses and books that have been helpful for others. We will talk about them shortly. I just want to start off first talking about your background, especially growing up Christian, which is the title for one of your books.
Yeah. Well, my wife and I, Pam, were born and raised in evangelical Christianity, which is a Protestant denomination. And we were well versed in the Bible and moral ethics. The denomination we grew up in was called Free Methodism, still is. It's very strict. At the time that we grew up in the Detroit metropolitan area, Free Methodism had one foot in kind of a separatist fundamentalist sort of sect. But it's generally liberalized since then a little bit. Free Methodism was like Wesleyan Methodists or Nazarene. In fact, at one point in time, those three denominations all tried to merge, but they didn't do that. But anyhow, growing up, our parents, at least my parents, allowed me to visit other churches and stuff because of friends that I had met, other Christian friends. And the more I looked around and listened to preachers and things like that and read about the doctrine of the denominations, I kept having problems with how or what I was hearing from the pulpit and what I was reading in the Bible. The two things didn't match. There seemed to be logical and linguistic inconsistencies, and that always bothered me. And then later on, when Pam and I were married, we both graduated from a Free Methodist, a very highly sought after academic school called Greenville College. It's now called Greenville University in Southern Illinois. Academics were really great. And after we graduated, we started having kids and stuff. And I became even more bothered by some of the things I was hearing from the pulpits of the evangelical churches that we were attending. And that went on for a number of years. And finally, I gave up. And it says, I'm not going to give up on God. I didn't give up on prayer or the Bible, but I really gave up on evangelicalism because of the inconsistencies between what they were teaching and what I was reading in the Bible. And of course, the interpretation is the issue. You know, it was my interpretation versus what the preacher or the pastor of the particular church we were attending was saying. And Pam was a little frustrated with my with my critical nature. So she would stick at the church and I would go hopping around churches looking for a new church to attend. And finally, one time out of frustration, I walked into St. James Catholic Church in Novi, Michigan, near my house. And the story's in my book, Growing Up Christian, and it's too long to go into right now. But essentially what happened, there's the book. Essentially what happened is that I suddenly discovered that I didn't find any inconsistencies logically or linguistically with what was going on in the Catholic Church versus what I was reading in the Bible. Of course, that occurred, though, after 8 months of intense study, because I was starting to see and hear things in the Catholic Church that were intriguing. And of course, I was indoctrinated, like Pam, against Catholicism, as if it was some sort of pagan cult that worshiped saints and not God. And it took about 8 months of really intensive reading to realize that that was what Protestants believed, but it wasn't what Catholics taught or what the Catholic Church taught. And so, finally, long story short, in the Easter Vigil of 1998, I came into the Catholic Church, and Pam came in the following year. And we just found there was just the inconsistencies disappeared. The logical things matched up. And what the Catholic Church taught and what the Bible text says, to me, to this day, perfectly agrees. And so we've come home. And so it really changed our lives.
And that was going to be my next question. How did it change your lives?
Well, we stopped arguing about things. In fact, our daughter, April, our middle daughter at the time, was living with us. And she actually came into the church as well, because she saw that we stopped arguing about things in the Bible. If we disagreed, we say, well, what does the church teach? And why does the church teach that? And of course, sometimes the church doesn't know why something is true. It's a mystery because God hasn't revealed it. The Bible doesn't talk about it. But it really gave us a unitized view of Christianity that we could both embrace and worship. And it was just very deep. And it takes a lifetime to understand it. But it's really wonderful. It's great.
And so, Stan, some of your books, one of the books that I have, aside from Growing Up Christian, is this one that's Basic Christianity.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. And you said you now have a new version of it, but I find it an easy read. And I guess based on the title, just covers a lot of the basics. And so it says Basic Christianity, Facts, Evidences, and Reasons. So what's the book about, and why did you decide to write it?
Well, I didn't actually write it. I edited it and created it, and I actually did ghostwrite a number of chapters in the book. But what happened was that back in the 1960s, Pam and I were both going to an evangelical Christian school, Greenville College, which was academically very tough. And one of the classes that we all had to take was a course by Dr. Stan Walters called Basic Christianity. I was an average student. I mean, I think I graduated with a C+ average from undergraduate school. But this course changed my life. Walters approached Christianity from the basis of facts, evidences, and logical reasons. He was, interestingly enough, you should appreciate this, his doctoral dissertation had to do with translating Babylonian cuneiform tablets. And he was one of the few people in the world back in the 60s and 50s, I guess, that was a Protestant, at least, that was translating these tablets. But so he approached Christianity from a fact-based thing, not from an ideological faith sort of way. And so that's what the course entailed. I was an average student. I asked him if the next semester I could record the course for my own personal edification, because I wasn't a good student. He said, yeah, sure, go ahead. I was on the radio station staff, so I could do that through the lecture hall from the radio station. And I did listen to the lectures after we graduated a little bit, but then we started having kids and things got too busy. 50 years later, I'm between film projects, and God tells me, take those tapes that you recorded out of the closet, remake or repair that old tape recorder and transcribe and make a book out of those lectures. So that's what it is. The book contains 33 lectures from the series, and it's illustrated with beautiful archaeological photographs, Johnny Hart cartoons, his Christian cartoon series, word memes, and a few charts. And it's a fabulous book that authenticates Christianity from a fact basis as opposed to an ideological faith basis. And in fact, that's one reason why Walters eventually had to leave the school, because the school was one, it's evangelicals think about faith only. They don't want the facts. They want it to be an ideology. And so Walters was essentially forced out because he was fact-based and evidence-based and logic-based. And but the book was great. And in fact, the university, when we published when we printed the second edition that came out in beautiful color, sewn bound from China, the university helped pay for the book and its printing. So they've changed quite a bit too.
And so I'm assuming he's no longer.
No, he's retired now. He's in his 90s now. He's
Okay.
alive, living in Ohio. No, he went on to start several Christian departments of religion and philosophy at the University of Toronto and a few other places. And he continued his research at Yale. He's an ancient Bible language scholar. That's what he is. So he had a very profitable life, and he continued to pastor churches on the weekends.
So this information I learned about you after, because I knew you as someone that was teaching screenwriting. You were teaching screenwriting and directing at film school at the MPI. And again, as I had mentioned, you were very helpful in that area, and you went on to write a book about it. Let me find from the stack of books that I have of yours, The Moral Premise. This is a very, very important book. I think it's not just for filmmakers or screenwriters. It's for storytellers, basically.
Yeah,
Right?
it's the book content is primarily based around films, because films are easier to describe in terms of structure to a general audience. But it is a story structure book, whether you're writing short stories, novels, movies, or even bedtime stories. And in fact, it's based on, well, it's essentially, I like to say, it's the sequel of Lagos Egri's book, The Art of Dramatic Writing, which is still a book that is in print in Hollywood. It came out in the 40s, and Ergi was a story consultant like I am. But most of his examples deal with old Greek plays and Broadway shows that we've never heard of. They're kind of obscure today. But so the moral premise updates Lagos Egri's book in terms of examples, and it also shows you how to do it, and it uses an example modern films. The book is really an outgrowth of my PhD dissertation. Will Smith picked it up the year after it came out and said that it's the best tool in his toolbox. In fact, I know that his staff continues to if you come on Will Smith's staff, you have to read my book, The Moral Premise. And I got to work with Will on a number of productions over the years.
Yeah, and I know that when I was working on Pomegranate, there was a lot of, and you were helping me strengthen the story, and we were going to back to the moral premise, a lot of what you teach in here. I think you also have courses available that people, is that still available on your website?
Yeah, the book is there, but there's a blog with a couple hundred. I mean, I think there's almost 300 articles on my blog where I analyze films and talk about story structure issues. And that I continue to update that as things come up. And then there's also the Storycraft training, which is a 12-hour workshop. It's essentially my 2-day workshop that I've given in Hollywood and around the country. But it's condensed down into a webisode series that you can purchase and download and have it on your computer. So all that is available. If you go to moralpremise.com or stanwilliams.com, you'll see links to all that stuff, and you can go there and discover that. So yeah, all that, the book and everything I've learned since, and what I've learned from, consulting on hundreds of scripts, it's all in that course.
So, Stan, one of the reasons that I invited you today, because before we get into the topic of, there's a conference coming up in December called History of the Catholic Faith in the Americas. Before we get into that, though, I just want to touch on a question. So how do you navigate between your faith and your film career? Like, do you feel that you end up writing stories or directing stories that are necessarily faith-based, or how do you navigate between the two? or how
Well,
does one help complement the other?
well, one way to respond to that is that I don't navigate it. I'm in Michigan, not Hollywood. And the reason I'm in Michigan and not Hollywood is that my marriage is probably more important than my career. I've been married 54 years. I'm not divorced, and of course the problem is that if I were to live in Hollywood, that might lead to a divorce, and that's why I never went to Hollywood.
Okay,
I've
I'll
been
make
out there.
sure I'll never move there then too. I'll stay.
I mean, I've been flown out to Hollywood a number of times, and I've done a lot of workshops and consulted with clients there. But I live in Michigan, and that's because my marriage is more important than my career.
Yeah,
But I
Michigan
have,
definitely keeps you grounded.
but I have tried to get my wife to move to LA a number of times, and she refuses because we have 10 grandchildren living within about 15, 20 minutes of us.
Oh,
So that's not going to, she's not going to move far from that.
okay.
So what happened is that um, God threw me a mulligan, you might say, or he threw me a bone with that book. And so I've been able to hobnob some with the people in LA and definitely consult on a lot of films. In fact, the films that I've worked on, mostly with Will Smith, they've earned more than $1 billion in the worldwide box office. So I've got some credibility and track record, and I continue to work with people. Although I have to admit that most of the people I work with, you've never heard of and you will never hear of. People are trying to understand how to write stories. And a lot of the people in Hollywood know how to write stories. So I'm trying to help those that don't know how to write do a better job of it. And occasionally I get to work with somebody important like Will Smith or
Like
something
Will
like
Smith.
that. Yeah.
And then so now, if you can tell us about the conference that's coming
But
up.
let me can I interrupt you though?
Sure.
Let me answer your earlier question, like how do I deal with my faith and Hollywood together?
Yeah.
I have to say that I have a lot of Christian friends in LA and in the industry. There are a lot of Christians working in the industry. And I typically do not work on faith-based films. I particularly don't like faith-based films, as they call them, because they tend to be not very good cinema. They tend not to be very good stories. And they tend to be illustrated sermons, which I do not appreciate. And I don't think they're very good. So, but when I've been in LA and I'm dealing with people that are not necessarily Christians, I kind of wear my Christianity on my sleeve. I don't push it. I don't quote scripture to people. I don't tell them what they ought to be doing ethically. I don't do any of that stuff. But they know who I am. My website makes that clear if they're curious. And I've never had any confrontation for anybody about my faith. In fact, I've had just the opposite. I've been respected very much so, and so it's been very nice.
Yeah, actually, I can vouch for that. I didn't know your background, your faith, until like many years later through our conversations. But you always focused on the work, the script, or whatever the project
Yeah.
that we were looking at. So that's good. So you focus on the story rather than, that's one thing that I think that the good thing about the moral premise is you focus on the story, not like there's no hidden agenda kind of.
No, there's not. The thing is, I want people to be successful. And quite honestly, one of the basic premises of the moral premise is that, and there are blogs that give all kinds of evidence to this that I've written, that if you want a story, movies, novel, or whatever, to be successful, it has to coincide with natural law. And natural law agrees perfectly with Christian doctrine, or especially Catholic doctrine. And so when I'm in a secular environment, I'm talking about natural law and how if you want to connect with audiences, you have to speak the truth. You have to tell the truth about the way the universe and the human psyche works. And so you don't have to talk about the Bible. But in a Christian context, I can quote scripture and talk about it, but it all comes back to what's naturally true, good, and beautiful. And people accept that.
Nice. And so going back now to the conference, History of the Catholic Faith in the Americas, and that's coming up, I believe it's next month. Can you give us some information about the dates, where it's at, and also what, I know you're speaking there. What is the topic? What is your topic?
It's Saturday, December 9th in Middle Way, West Virginia, which is in the eastern panhandle of West Virginia. It's just about an hour west of Baltimore. And the conference is looking at, well, the theme of the conference is what can we learn from Catholic history as it applies or as it occurred in the Americas, namely Latin America and the United States, because we have a session on Our Lady of Guadalupe, that can lead us to do things better as Catholics in terms of reviving and helping to redeem the culture. That's what the theme is. So it's past lessons, future wisdom, seeking revival is the kind of like the log line of the conference. And we've got 8 historians, including myself. I'm counting myself as a part-time historian, and I'll explain that in a second, who are coming to talk about issues throughout Catholic history. And it's going to be really interesting. The conference, though, what's interesting about the conference and where it's being held, the trigger for it was my book, The Wizard Clip Haunting. The Wizard Clip Haunting is a historical novel about events that occurred in that area in the late 1790s. And yeah, that's the book. And it's a historical novel that
isn't it a 3-part? It's not a 3-part series. It's just that you have it.
It's what?
It's not a series, but I have
no, it's there is a trilogy edition, because the book is so heavy and thick that we made a trilogy version so that the 7 parts are divided up, and so they're lighter to hold. So you can, so some people say, one woman was complaining that she likes to read in bed with the book over her head, and the book kept falling on her face. So we gave her a lighter version,
Okay. So that explains it. Okay. Yeah. So tell us about that story. I know I came to your book signing. It was really nice hearing the background story.
Right. So real quickly, there was this haunted house. It's well documented. Some priests, and in fact, the first bishop of the United States got involved. So the events of the Wizard Clip are true. There's a lot written about it. There's a town called Cliptown, or nicknamed Cliptown, still in West Virginia. It's now Middle Way, West Virginia. And when the house was exorcised by these Catholic priests, very well documented. You go online and type in Wizard Clip, you'll get 100 hits. Adam Livingston, the farmer, in thanks to the Catholics that exorcised the church, gave 35 acres, or 10% of his land, a tithe, to the church for the keeping of a priest. That land today is Priestfield Pastoral Center, and that's where we're having the history conference. So the events around the Wizard Clip event and the exorcism of the property and the establishment of Priestfield really did establish Catholicism in the eastern panhandle of West Virginia. And so there's a lot of people that are fans about the history. And so my book hit a nerve, and a number of people said, let's keep this discussion going. And your book has been the trigger for talking about the historical elements that led to this property being what it is today. So that's what the conference is about, and what triggered it.
And Stan, I know that you're always working on something. What is your next project about?
Well, the next thing I'm going to try to finish is what I started last summer. I got roped by a priest that I know in South Carolina, Father Dwight Longnecker. He intrigued me with his world travels throughout Europe and the discovery. He didn't discover this, but what is this? There are 7 monasteries, ancient monasteries, in a straight line, a perfectly straight line from Ireland to Israel, and it's called the Sword of St. Michael. And last summer, I visited all 7 monasteries, took a bunch of video, and I was scouting in an attempt to take a film crew and Father Dwight along to investigate these monasteries and what makes them so special. And we didn't get the money, but I shot a lot of video. So this next winter and into the spring, probably a little bit, I hope to finish an hour-long television documentary on that trip that I did on the Sword of St. Michael monasteries from Europe to Israel.
Oh, this would be a documentary. It's not
right.
Okay. Well, that would be fascinating.
And And in fact, if you go to my website and you look, the name of the project is Angel Quest. And if you go to Angel Quest on my website, you'll go to a website. And if you look under the reports tab, I filed 20 some video reports of my trip. I wasn't able to post them during my trip because the internet connections in Europe where I was staying were so bad, but I finished them when I came back. So you'll see a lot of the video and a lot of the information about this really fascinating line of ancient monasteries that were built over 1,500 years by diverse different monks and friars. And they're all dedicated to St. Michael, and they all are in a perfectly straight line. So it's real interesting.
And when is that first time that you went there to Europe that you said?
Last summer. I did it last June.
Okay.
Last June, yeah.
Okay. Given your background and, you know, with how, especially helping writers and your consulting and the books that you've written, what advice, you know, and like last words for particularly writers, filmmakers, storytellers, something that you think that you want our audience to walk away from today?
There's a lot to do. There's always a story. There's always some truth to be discovered. My mission in life is to discover and promote divine truth to those within my sphere of influence. And I just hope that other people have a thirst for discovering what truth is and for communicating that truth. And my particular skill set has to do with media, books and films and documentaries and things like that. And so I try to use those skills and that set of talents to try to communicate what is true, good, and beautiful. And I just hope that others do the same. And so I'm trying to help people do that through things like the Moral Premise and the Storycraft training series that I have and stuff like that, and my consulting.
And so you still do consult, right? People can, when they go to,
still do
contact you for that. Okay. Yeah.
I continue to have one or two scripts and clients that come to me, and if it's like the story is, if I have money, I'll make a movie. If I don't, I write a book. although the wizard clip cost me almost as much as a small documentary by the time I got done with the marketing.
Well, we only have like a minute or two left, and any last words? And I don't know. I often wonder, what is the one thing that like you think stops people from being able to accomplish what they're trying, whether it's a book or a film or whatever? What is one thing that you've observed with all, you know, teaching at MPI and such, that stops people from going forward with their projects?
Well, it's probably two things: fear and education. Most people, if they really want to, can figure things out. You know, it's like when your roof leaks, you don't panic. You take some tar and you go upstairs and you patch the hole in the roof, which I've done a few times. But most people are afraid. They don't know what to do. They don't know where to look for information. And then they don't even, maybe they don't have the knowledge of how to do it or what to say. And so what I try to tell people is, please read. Continue to read books of anything that you're interested in, but be passionate about knowledge and truth. And then as you read and discover how to do things, figure out how to tell others about it, and then go do it and just start it. If you're afraid of not finishing, you won't. I promise you won't finish, because you'll never start. But if you start and you get up every day out of bed and say, I'm going to do this, you got to have a passion for it. And then you'll bring some good to the world.
Yeah. And sometimes people, especially when it comes to writing books and making films, they romanticize the situation. They don't see the work that's involved behind the scenes, which is really a lot.
And you and I both understand this, but there's a really great metaphor. If you've seen we have a sailboat, and we do a lot of sailing in the Great Lakes. Mm-hmm. It's a big sailboat. We stay overnight on it and all that, and take our families on it. But here's the deal. If you see all the photographs of sailing in the Caribbean, there's beautiful blue skies and water, and it's beautiful, and they're just coasting along. It's just so gorgeous, and people are wearing bathing suits and eating cuisine. That's not what sailing is like. Sailing is repairing the toilet because it doesn't flush. Sailing is repairing the bottom because it's leaking. Sailing is it's hard work. And so you have to enjoy work. if you're going to enjoy sailing. And so you have to enjoy working hard at making films and writing books like
Amen to that. You have to enjoy work. I know most people have this negative feeling about work, but you got to do the work. And just the best way to be able to do the work, just enjoy it.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
Thank you so much. This was great, Stan. Every time we interview you or you do any kind of workshops or anything, it's always informative and very helpful. Thank you so much.
Well, good to see you too. Thank you very much.
Take
Bye-bye.
care. Thank you, everybody, for watching. Have a wonderful day. Bye-bye.